Moving on. Our main story tonight concerns the World Cup. It's like the Super Bowl, except the rest of the world actually gives a fuck. The World Cup is a big deal. A country even qualifying for it is a cause for huge celebration. Just watch this Australian reporter lose his mind when his nation beat Peru on penalties to make it to the tournament.
We're through! We're through! How good is this? How good is this? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Get here! Oh, nummer scout!
There is nothing not to love about that. From the reporter holding out his microphone to amplify people's joy shrieking, to the guy kissing the camera, to someone stealing his scarf, which sadly he never got back. And the reason I know that is I have it now. Oh, sure, it used to be your mum's, but now it's all mine. The World Cup got underway today, and we've talked before about the organisation behind it, FIFA, a cartel-like group of scumbags and assorted criminals who occasionally put on soccer matches. FIFA has always been terrible, which is what makes it a little hard to hear FIFA's current president claim that their event isn't just about sport. It's a net positive for humanity.
This FIFA World Cup, a tournament of peace and unity, will be the one that brings the world together after some difficult times. We should never underestimate the unifying power that something so unique has.
Well, that is some pretty grandiose talk coming from the star of What the Fuck Are Those Eyebrows, Charlie Brown. But the truth is a lot more complicated than that, which is not to say that I am not excited about the World Cup, because I am. It only happens every 4 years, and I look forward to it the way people with leap year birthdays look forward to leap years, with an enthusiasm somewhere between understandable and honestly kind of pathetic. And this World Cup is being hosted for the very first time in the Middle East by the small nation of Qatar, which is going all out to turn it into a major branding event, even signing a massive multi-million-dollar agreement with David Beckham to be an ambassador for the country, which presumably includes getting him to make more videos like this.
I think everyone knows how much I love food, and the food culture is very exciting in Qatar. This is what I love, you know, I love to go to spice markets, I love to go to fish markets. I love Murakami.
Oh yeah,
Love Murakami. Everybody knows how much I love a taco. But what I love is also we are now in this amazing place. Using the traditional spices. I love riding, I love a bike community.
I love being in the middle of nowhere and talking and eating, and this is perfection for me.
OK, so by my count, David Beckham lost the following: food, food culture, spice markets, fish markets, Murakami, a taco, bike culture, and of course, being in the middle of nowhere, eating and talking. They really should have just kept taking him to places to see what they could get him to say he loves for money. I love public bathrooms. The aromas, the atmosphere, I just love them. I love cemeteries. Everyone knows how much I love tombstones and grieving families. I love proctologists' offices. I just love proctologist culture. This is perfection for me. The point is, the next month is Qatar's big moment on the world stage. They're hosting an event expected to attract over 1 million spectators in person to a country just the size of Connecticut. But as you may have heard, underneath the fun, pageantry and David Beckham doing bad Anthony Bourdain cosplay is a much darker story, small signs of which have leaked out this week, like in this moment from a Danish reporter.
Hvordan oplever du forholdene lige nu?
Jamen, vi kan jo vise, hvordan forholdene er lige her, hvis vi drejer kameraet. We are live on Danish television, og der kan I se, nu bliver vi stoppet med at filme, og det er forholdene her. Mister, you invited the whole world to you invited the whole world to come here. Why can't we film? It's a public place. But listen. But you can break the camera. You want to break the camera? Okay, you break the camera. Okay. Yes. So you're threatening us by smashing the camera.
Wow. Just a reminder, he was asked, how would you describe working conditions for journalists in Qatar? And just seconds later, a bunch of golf cart goons showed up to answer that question for him. Although, credit to this guy for being so excited to appear on Danish TV that he gave the camera a little wave before presumably smashing the shit out of it. But harassing journalists is just the tip of the iceberg here, one that includes a host of human rights violations. So given all of that, tonight, Let's talk about the Qatar World Cup. And let's start by going back to the moment back in 2010 when the winner of the bid to host this tournament was announced by the former head of FIFA, Sepp Blatter.
The winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
Look, as a general rule, I try not to make fun of old men who don't speak English as a first language, but due to evil, Sepp Blatter is an exception, and him saying 2022 like a vampire telling the time will just always be funny to me. But that moment truly stunned people, because for reasons that it turns out FIFA were fully aware of, Qatar was a fundamentally unsound choice for a summer soccer tournament.
FIFA conducted its own objective analysis of the various bids, which found that Qatar was an unsuitable place to host the World Cup and a dangerous place to host the World Cup, that the summer temperatures would be a hazard to the health of the players and the fans, that Doha simply didn't have space for the kind of stadium infrastructure that was going to be required.
They would have to build 9 new stadiums, and there wasn't enough room for them in Doha, so they would have to kind of create a whole new city.
Yeah, Qatar wasn't just a surprising choice, it was logically inexplicable. It'd be like if the Westminster Dog Show awarded the Best in Show title to a tortoise. Nothing against that tortoise, but not only should it not have won, it should have been automatically disqualified. Now, the first and most obvious problem was that Qatar is notoriously scorching hot in the summer. That is why FIFA eventually moved the World Cup to November. But Qatar's initial pitch simply pretended that heat wouldn't be an issue, promising that they'd build air-conditioned outdoor stadiums, while Qatari scientists pitched ideas like a massive remote-control artificial cloud that they could move around to cover stadiums in shade, which A, didn't exist, and B, wouldn't solve your problem anyway. It's the multi-million-dollar equivalent of pulling down the little car flap to keep the sun out of your eyes. And at this point, you will not be surprised to learn of the many accusations that Qatar won their World Cup bid through bribery, with allegations including that 3 of the officials who agreed to vote for Qatar did so in exchange for $1 million each. And I won't say that Qatar definitely got the World Cup through bribery, but I won't say that they didn't, and I will say that they did. And while they deny that there was any misconduct in their bid, the fact remained that they were going to need to build not just a bunch of new stadiums, but also a new airport, metro system, roads, and about 100 new hotels. They had to build so much new infrastructure, in fact, that even the World Cup's mascot, Laib, doesn't seem to be able to believe what his country has just done.
First thing I want to show you is the stadiums. Oh, the stadiums! 8 mind-blowing arenas designed by some of the best architects in the world. This is Lusail City. Can you believe it didn't exist 10 years ago? Now, it's one of the cities hosting FIFA World Cup matches.
You know what, Laib? I can't believe that city wasn't there 10 years ago either, and it's actually a bit alarming. If you drove by an empty plot of land with a sign reading "Coming soon at TGA Fridays," and the very next day drove by and saw the grand opening of it, you'd rightly have some questions about how the fuck it happened that fast. According to one estimate, Qatar's government has spent more than $300 billion on infrastructure projects. And look, they can afford that. They have a lot of money thanks to their huge oil and natural gas reserves. What they don't have a lot of, though, is Qataris, because Qatari nationals only number around 380,000. However, the country has an overall population of nearly 3 million. And that is because 90% of it consists of foreigners and migrant workers. And it's migrant workers who perform most of the manual labour there. And those labourers are the ones who've had to build all the new infrastructure for this tournament, which brings us to one of the major scandals underlying it.
Qatar recruited hundreds of thousands of workers, mainly from India, Nepal and Bangladesh, through agencies in their home countries. Just to secure a job, migrants had little choice but to pay recruitment fees of up to $4,000 before they left the country. And once they got to Qatar, they were already in debt and trapped in a system known in the Middle East as kafala.
The kafala system can be a form of modern-day slavery, and the features of it amount in some cases to forced labor.
It's true. All the new stadiums and infrastructure were essentially built through modern-day slavery. So we should probably introduce a new collective noun to refer to this group of stadiums: a gaggle of geese, a pod of whales, an atrocity of stadiums. The kafala system exists in some form in several countries in the Middle East, and under it in Qatar, workers couldn't switch jobs or leave the country without the explicit permission of their employer, in some cases because they might have literally had their passport taken away. And being so fully dependent on an employer meant that labourers had virtually no rights. Take Anish, a labourer from Nepal, who maintains that he was routinely underpaid and for doing work in truly brutal conditions.
I went to Qatar in 2019. On the 21st of March, I started working at the Lusail Stadium. It was very hot in Qatar. It got up to 52 degrees Celsius the first year I was there. I used to sweat in the exact way as if it was raining from the sky.
You know how hot 52 degrees Celsius is? It's 125 degrees Fahrenheit. If you build a stadium in that heat, you should get to own it. That shouldn't be Lusail Stadium. That should be Anish's fucking stadium. And no one should be allowed inside it without saying that out loud. And there's something pretty fucked up about arguing it's too hot for peak athletes to be outside for 90 minutes. But you know what? It's completely fine for people to build stadiums in that heat for hours a day and for months on end. And that's not even getting into the living conditions that workers there were subjected to.
We drove outside the city to a place the government doesn't want people to see. The sprawling labor camps where the workers are housed. Inside, the men were packed wall to wall, 8 to a room. The heat was stifling, the kitchen filthy. The beds, they told us, infested with bed bugs. 22-year-old Koum lives here among 150 other men. They share 2 bathrooms.
There's no shower here. There's nowhere to wash your body. No. Where do you wash your body?
Then buckets.
You wash your body in the toilet?
Yes.
Hard to believe, but in these camps, it's routine. At another camp, the toilets overflowed with sewage, and 2 filthy kitchens were being shared by 600 men.
That is horrifying. No one should ever have to live like that. Just wait until Laib finds out about this. Yeah, your tournament's built on human suffering, buddy. And you should know, when that reporter went and talked to the head of one of Qatar's leading sports organisations, it didn't go well.
You go yourself and investigate it. You will see them living in a very, comfortable, healthy environment.
Comfortable and healthy?
Of course.
Let me say
living
this,
in a
Mr.
very healthy environment, alhamdulillah.
Mr. Al-Suladdin, with all due respect, we have gone to the camps.
You went yourself?
Yes, this week in Doha, where you have hundreds of thousands of men living in labor camps. Some of them packed into small rooms, 8 men to a room, like the one we saw. 10 men sharing a toilet, no showers. Have you been to the labor camps yourself, sir?
I'm not going to answer your questions.
You don't want to answer that?
Of course I don't want to answer it.
And with that, we were told the interview was over.
Incredible. Nothing says workers live in a comfortable and healthy environment quite like leaving the room 30 seconds after you realise that the person you're talking to has actually seen that environment. And it gets worse. A Guardian investigation found that 6,500 migrant workers died in Qatar from 2010 to 2020. Now, that number accounts for all migrant worker deaths in Qatar, not just those who worked on stadiums. But the Qatari government's preferred count states that there have actually only been 37 deaths among labourers at World Cup stadiums, and of those, that only 3 were work-related. But if that number seems suspiciously low to you, it's because it very much is. Their preferred count is conveniently limited to the small handful of work sites that were under the highest level of scrutiny and exclude the hundreds of other World Cup-related projects. What's more, autopsies weren't done on most of these workers, with one investigation finding that nearly 70% of deaths of Indian, Nepali and Bangladeshi nationals were attributed simply to natural causes or cardiac arrest, which feels deliberately vague. Because cardiac arrest just means their heart stopped, which is literally how everybody dies. I can tell you with full confidence that his heart stopped is how both I and Kid Rock will die. That doesn't mean that our cardiac arrest will be caused by the same thing, though, does it? One of our deaths will likely involve a lot of meth, a monster truck and a variety of illegal fireworks, and the other death will be Kid Rock's. And Qatar will argue that they have made some significant labour reforms. It's something that the head of their World Cup efforts has proudly bragged about.
If we look at the actions that the government has taken so far, laws implemented and being applied as well, the kafala system has been dismantled, both in terms of allowing for workers to change employers, and at the same time also there was the exit permit system.
They couldn't leave without permission.
Leave without permission. That has been dismantled as well.
Look, those reforms sound great, and to an extent they are, but they also have some major asterisks on them. Workers in Qatar have said that they are still required to get permission from their current employer before they can move to a new job, and have also experienced retaliation from their employers when they try to leave. But also, the reforms that he's bragging about there only began to be implemented in 2018, when much of the hard work was already done. So he is bragging about dismantling the kafala system while sitting in a stadium built using it. The only way that pat on the back could have been more hypocritical is if he'd forced a migrant worker to do it for him in 120-degree heat. But incredibly, it's not just Qatar bragging about the progress that's been made. FIFA has had the nerve to claim credit for it too.
All the changes that have happened in this country in terms of human rights and workers' rights and so on, human rights would not have happened, or certainly not at the same speed, without the projectors of the World Cup.
OK, corruption Caillou, that is one hell of a fucking claim there. Because you cannot possibly argue FIFA deserves credit here. FIFA's evaluation of Qatar's bid had literally zero mentions of human rights or demands for labour reforms. Think of it like this. If the country had made no changes to its kafala system in the past few years and instead had passed a law called the Doubling Down on Slave Labour Act of 2019, you know what would have happened? The World Cup still would have kicked off in Qatar today. Isn't that right, Laib? Wink if you agree. Yeah, I fucking knew it. I knew you knew what was going on there. When FIFA awarded Qatar the World Cup, there was only one way those stadiums were getting built, and there was only one group of people who were going to do it, and they gave them the tournament anyway. And that is not the only troubling thing that they had to have known back then. Because let's take a moment to talk about Qatar's human rights situation. And I recognise every country has human rights issues, including this one. For more on that, see every other story this show has ever done. But Qatar is, in some ways, next level. Women there have very limited rights. They need permission from their male guardians to marry, work in many government jobs, and travel abroad until certain ages. Also, because sex outside of marriage is illegal, pregnant women have to present a marriage certificate to receive prenatal care, which I hesitate to even tell you about, just in case the Supreme Court is watching this show tonight and getting any new ideas. As for the LGBT community, sexual conduct between men is criminalised and can result in 7 years in prison. And FIFA was not unaware of this. Sepp Blatter even joked about it just days after Qatar was awarded the tournament, because when he was asked what advice he would give to gay fans who might want to travel to Qatar, this was his fun response.
Then I would say then that they should refrain from any sexual activities.
You know, they say in comedy you can either punch up, punch down, or co-sign oppressive governments for a quick laugh while looking like the Penguin went to Wharton. And we all know which option he just chose there. Get Sepp Blatter a Netflix special, it seems like he's ready. Now, Qatar has frequently repeated that everyone is welcome at this World Cup, including gay fans. But as this gay Qatari man, who was granted asylum in the US, citing the dangers he faced there, points out, even if that is the case for the next 4 weeks, it's a hell of a blind eye to turn.
It's like having a household with children that are domestically abused, and now you're going to have a fancy dinner party. People can come in, they can bring their kids can jump on the table, and they can do everything that they want. The children that live there are going to be in the basement, quiet, behaving, and they can jump on the table like the other kids that visited, because they will be punished in that household for doing it. Well, now you know that the children there are abused. So how are you showing up to our home?
Exactly. The Qatari government is engaging in some truly horrendous behaviour, and we can't just gloss over that and uncritically put it in the spotlight. It's an authoritarian regime, not Mel fucking Gibson. And by the way, here's a fun game. Guess how many movies he's been in this year? You're wrong, it's 7. This truly has been the year of Mel. And none of this, the working conditions, the oppression of women or gay people, was a deal-breaker for FIFA. In fact, Qatar's authoritarian tendencies may actually have been a deal sweetener. Because FIFA has long had a soft spot for autocrats. And I'm not just saying that because they gave the World Cup to Russia in 2018 or went ahead with one in Argentina in 1978 when it was run by a military dictatorship, or even that they held the second World Cup ever in Mussolini's Italy in 1934. They've said it themselves. FIFA's former Secretary-General, Jerome Valk, once said, "I will say something which is crazy, but less democracy is sometimes better for organising a World Cup. When you have a very strong head of state, that is easier for us organisers." And even for a quote which is prefaced by, "I will say something which is crazy," that is fucking nuts. But authoritarians are good for FIFA, and FIFA is good for authoritarians. As this critic points out, Russia's World Cup 4 years ago was preceded by a lot of controversy and criticism. But that's not what people remember about it.
What you saw in the run-up to 2018 was a lot of coverage of what was happening in Russia, a lot of coverage of the rights abuses, a lot of interest in that, and a lot of engagement in it. And I think what the Qataris will have noticed was how that all vanished as soon as the first whistle blew. And I think everyone became captivated by the football. The Qataris know that if they can just get to that first whistle, then they're over the line.
It's true. Such is the power of the World Cup. Any memories of controversy are likely to be washed away once it begins. And incidentally, what a VIP box to be a part of there. Quick tip for the president of FIFA. If you're going to make arguments about how your organisation is a global force for good, maybe try not to sit between Mohammed bin Salman and Vladimir Putin, because you are the filling in a real shit sandwich there. And the thing is, that first whistle has now been blown. Qatar played Ecuador in the opening game of the tournament earlier today. So, what now? Well, workers like Anish hope that some of the athletes participating can help shine a light on all the exploitation that went into this event.
My message for Messi. Thousands of workers like me have worked on the stadium. We did not get our salary, our benefits. I hope that if you talk about workers like us, maybe we will get what we are owed. I do not have much faith, but still, I have hope.
Yeah, and that hope is pretty moving, especially given all the reasons not to have any. And I really hope that Messi hears that message, though, given that he plays for Paris Saint-Germain, a team literally owned by the State Investment Fund of Qatar, I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for him to criticise them. People generally don't openly shit on their employers, unless, of course, that employer is Warner Brothers Discovery, in which case you can happily shit away, because apparently they're too busy cancelling shows to notice. And I will say, some players, to their credit, have been speaking out. Harry Kane and other team captains have said that they'll wear a One Love armband during games, and organisations from Australia's national team to FIFPro, the International Players' Union, have issued statements condemning Qatar's treatment of workers, women and gay people. But ultimately, it's not the players who are responsible for this mess, it's FIFA. They put the World Cup in Qatar, and everything that's happened since then has been a complete disgrace. And here's the thing, I'm not saying that you shouldn't watch this World Cup or be excited about it. As tough as this is to admit, I will be watching. One of my greatest joys is sitting completely alone in my living room and cheering on England until they're inevitably knocked out in the quarterfinals on penalties. But let's try and make sure a line is drawn here. Because in a few weeks' time, the World Cup will be over. The final whistle will be blown on December 18th in the stadium that Anish built in a city that didn't exist 10 years ago, and FIFA will happily move on. And while they will point to new human rights policies that they've now adopted, we'll see how truly committed to those they really are, especially given that one of the suitors to host the 2030 World Cup is rumoured to be Saudi Arabia, which also uses the kafala system and has an even worse human rights record than Qatar. Look, there is no reason to believe that FIFA will ever do the right thing. But I would love it if it could, for just once in its shitty history, find a way to hold itself to the lofty ideals that it has the gall to profess. I would love that as much as I love the World Cup itself, and maybe, just maybe, even as much as David Beckham loves a taco. Because that would be perfection for me.